My god, I love Muffins 142 video essays.
Resident Evil is a survival horror puzzle video game series that originally came out in March 22nd, 1996. And it was instantly a massive hit. It sold like 1 million copies in the first year that it released, and it would go on to revolutionize the genre of survival horror in video games. The game company Capcom would eventually make more of these games, and now, today, in 2026, there is a little over 30 different games in the series. This includes spin-offs and remakes, which are one of the main reasons there's so many of these games. But if it wasn't for those remakes, I probably never would have gotten into Resident Evil, and I just think they're the best horror games of all time in my opinion, and I love Resident Evil. Also, Resident Evil 9 comes out very soon, and I'm hella hyped. But anyway, I am a true gamer. If I were to put myself in the ascending to Chad system, I would probably put myself as a low tier Chad. I'm getting a phone call right now, but I need to keep talking. When it comes to my gamer knowledge, I would say I'm a low tier Chad because even though I'm not like obviously a Chad light, like assembling my own PCs and shit, or evacuating yourself from every single shower in the world and grass and stream every day in your room, lock yourself in your room, lock yourself in your room, lock yourself in your room.
That with ICE is because they're not doing enough.
Oh my god.
They need to deport
So base.
more people.
So base.
They would have to deport like thousands of people every week in order to make a dent in the issues that we have right now.
True.
So anyway, my knowledge on how different fundamentals work into certain video games like Resident Evil are pretty good, and that's what I want to talk about today. But first, let me keep glazing Resident Evil. So believe me when I say this, I love Resident Evil so much. I think it's the coolest blend of insane, visceral horror with gore and puzzles and survival and the feeling of trying to navigate throughout a maze and like a maze full of scary monsters and puzzles, and you need to get this key to unlock a door that leads to a pillbox that gives you the little inscriptions to the keypad that goes into the stairway, which you need to like assemble a bunch of runes on like a little tablet to make the stairway go down into a hallway, which leads into this like fuck-ass boss fight like type thing with cheesy like B-movie weird video game acting.
No way, Leon!
Way. Hasta luego.
They're called the Los Illuminados.
Los Illuminados. That's a mouthful.
Are you out of your mind?
I knew you'd be fine if you landed on your butt. Where's everyone going? Bingo?
And just sick action and something that makes running through a police station, running away from a bunch of zombies and a monster that just wants to kill you, and surviving on the resources that you have while solving all these puzzles so much cooler and scarier. Also conserving the little amount of items and heals and little bits of ammo that the game gives you is just so awesome. The literal save mechanic is an item in the game that you need to use to save the game. If you don't have it, then you can't save the game. This is speaking for the people who play the game on hard, which is like the main way to play it. It's how the first Resident Evil game works. So if you don't play on hard, you're not a real fan. But this feature is probably my favorite feature in Resident Evil as a franchise because it is just on higher difficulties. Resident Evil games actually need some pretty strategic and calculated planning to make sure you don't get stuck on a boss that you're literally incapable of beating, and the only saves you have are really shitty ones where you don't have any ammo at all, so going back to them is pointless, and the boss you're beating is stupid as shit, and it just one-taps you. But those are the reasons I love Resident Evil. However, what I just said is mainly not what this video is about at all. The Resident Evil formula can be broken down into 4 major components. The survival, with inventory management and item scarcity. The heavy emphasis on puzzles with every area you encounter, like having at least one crazy puzzle that leads to the next. Action, because whether it be third person, first person, or some weird camera angle, you are always going to be some person with a gun that's trying to shoot something else. And lastly, the horror. because it just can't be a Resident Evil game without some spooky environment with some spooky monsters. While there are some games that lean more into the action than the horror, they all have that supernatural, scary vibe. And this is what I wanted to talk about in this video because I feel like Resident Evil in the entire franchise rarely switches this up at all. After Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil was really falling off, and the only reason it came back was because when Resident Evil 7 came out, they switched up their horror element. The game was now in first person, which had never been done before, and it created this claustrophobic feel, which made running away from this satanic family even more terrifying. But now with Resident Evil 9 Requiem coming out very soon, it looks like they're going back to their old roots, and I just think that the horror element in Resident Evil is really good, but they just don't switch it up enough. There's so many different types of horror genres out there, and Resident Evil rarely even touches on these for like a second. Which, yes, the standard formula that makes Resident Evil great is amazing, but a lot of Resident Evil's horror can be summed up into, whoa, this is really scary because I don't have a lot of resources and I think there's a guy over there. Well, that big monster just jump scared me. Well, at least I can nuke him with my grenade launcher in the next boss fight. What is going on anymore? The rock. It's practically something that never changes or gets switched up at all, and I think if Resident Evil doesn't start taking more risks with what they try to portray in their games, it could lead to them starting to feel repetitive. And what made me come to this revelation in the first place was when I played this game called The original Silent Hill 2 came out on September 21st, 2001. It was made by this little game company called Konami, and in this little subdivision of the department, there was this team called Team Silent, and they basically made the spooky games. And they made these games called Silent Hill, and they made like 4 of them. I heard they're all really good, but the one that got the most traction was Silent Hill 2. I heard so much about this game, like that it dealt with heavy topics, and it was just so good next to all of its predecessors, and I was like, okay, I need to play this game at some point, and then I just never played the game for like years and years and years. I also saw how similar it was to Resident Evil, and that immediately turned me off because I was like, what's better than Resident Evil? Like they're just copying it. Like what? So I didn't really understand the hype. I never played the original game, and I was not really intending on ever really playing the game until PlayStation Plus just came through and smacked it down on my library, and I was like, okay. So I played the remastered version of Silent Hill 2, or no, the remake. So I played the game to see what all the hype was about, and whoa. Not only was this game amazing, but there was elements of it that kinda put Resident Evil to shame. And gameplay wise, yeah, it was practically a carbon copy of Resident Evil. But when it comes to gameplay, it's a whole different ballpark entirely. It felt like I was watching one of those weird interpretive artsy movies. It also reminded me a lot of the movie Shutter Island, which is such a good movie. Basically, the story goes like this. You play as this guy, James, who has this letter from his wife telling him to go to this town called Silent Hill to meet her at this special place they used to go to. James has no idea what this special place is because he doesn't remember them having one, and also his wife died of an illness like 3 years ago. Nevertheless, you embark on your journey into the foggy town of Silent Hill, and it gets pretty weird. You meet 3 other people in this journey, and they all seem to be looking for something deep inside the town. There's Angela, who's this woman who's looking for her mom, and I'll get to her later. Then there's Eddie, who's this kid who seems to be running away because he was bullied for his weight. And finally, there's Maria, who is quite identical to your wife that you're trying to find, and pretty much is just like really weird and tries to flirt with you throughout the game, and she also dies at multiple points in the game and then comes back and talks to James. You also come across a bunch of nightmare monsters, one of them being this dude called the Triangle Head, and I mean, the name implies, but he chases you throughout the game and is practically invincible, and he just tries to kill James like in every segment. And finally, James finds this special place, which is this hotel called Lakeview Hotel, and in that hotel he watches a tape of his wife basically talking to him. This is when James comes to terms with himself, and it's revealed that his wife didn't die of the illness, he smothered her with a pillow like right when he actually came to the town. This entire journey was basically him coming to terms with his repressed guilt. He did it because he didn't want to watch his wife be miserable anymore, and he also didn't want to be like her caretaker. It's kind of complex whether this was like mercy or if James is just a bad person, but it's pretty obvious that it's not really just some one-sided he's a bad person type of thing. And there's a few endings. There's one where he leaves Silent Hill, and there's one where he drives his car into a lake, and then there's one where he basically leaves with this fake wife, Maria, and ignores the truth that he killed his wife, pretty much. Angela was sexually assaulted by her father, and her mother never spoke out on it, leading to Angela eventually killing him. Eddie was repeatedly bullied for being fat, and he eventually shot someone's dog, and then he shot the owner and wounded him, and then ran away into Silent Hill, I guess. Maria is a figment of James's imagination, and she's basically the version of his wife that he wanted during that time that his real wife was sick. You can go much deeper with this game and like look into theories and lore or whatever, but that's like the main gist of the story. And yeesh, I was not expecting it to be that dark. And then I thought to myself, I was like, has Resident Evil ever done something like this? No, Resident Evil has never done something like this. Silent Hill 2 isn't chained down by its gameplay, and it doesn't rely so heavily on action and just survival. It leans heavily into the mystery and intrigue of the story while also having really good gameplay, and like obviously, yeah, there is combat. There's a series of guns you acquire throughout the game to kill all these monsters, and there's also like a melee weapon, but that's nothing compared to what Resident Evil provides. And to me, that's a really good thing. And it really showed when I was in the prison, and that's like near kind of the end of the game, kinda. And I was kind of getting fed up. I was playing it on normal, and the story at this point was just so interesting to me. I kind of didn't care about the gameplay, and I knew I would come back to the game like at some point multiple times, so on harder difficulties. So I turned the game on easy, and I was like, okay, I just kind of want to get this over with. And my experience didn't really change at all. Not necessarily because it was more easy, but just the game is so weird and mysterious and wonky that like I never really felt a massive change. And this is something that Resident Evil could never do in their wildest dreams. Those games rely so much on surviving all these monsters, getting all this ammo, and mowing down zombies. And I thought to myself, if I was going throughout a Resident Evil playthrough and I switched to easy mode halfway through the game would change exponentially. And that's because the gameplay carries the pretty corny story. But Silent Hill did not do that, and it actually used its story as a big backbone to make it such a good game. And the horror element that Silent Hill 2 uses is one that Resident Evil never has, and it's I feel like there's not enough big psychological media out there. Movies and shows that portray these types of psychological weird tropes are usually not that popular. I think the best and biggest example of one is Shutter Island again. But like just in general, I'm trying to see more weird movies out there and like I'm not really seeing them. But video games though, video games go crazy. So I'm gonna list off a few that I think that Resident Evil could take some notes off of. One of my favorite tropes in stories is the unreliable narrator. The plot where the main character is revealed to be not exactly who they seem in the end. A lot of movies do this. Shutter Island does it. This weird ass movie on Netflix called I'm Thinking of Ending Things does it. A bunch of other examples, but I don't really know right now. And you can also see this in video games with obviously Silent Hill 2 with everything I just explained. And there's another really good example, the 2024 indie game Mouthwashing. I'm not going to talk about this game for that long because I really want to finish this video soon. The game is set in a spaceship where basically you're this company called Pony Express and you like deliver things to planets, and the game starts with you crashing the ship into an asteroid. This was the pilot who did this, and his name is Curly. It then flashes forward and you play as one of the crew members in this kind of stranded like spaceship because you guys crashed and you guys don't know what to do. You figure out your name is Jimmy and you're basically kind of like the new captain of the ship. However, the captain Curly is actually still alive and he's wrapped in bandages and is severely wounded, as you can see. And throughout the game, you're forced to basically cram meds down his mouth, and it makes this really like gross noise, and it's really weird. And then towards the end of the game, it flashes back to the past, and you learn basically that Jimmy, you assaulted one of the crew members named Anya, and it resulted in a pregnancy. And Jimmy, scared of losing his job, he pilots the ship and smashes it into an asteroid, with Curly trying to stop him last second, but failing, and he takes the head of the blast face on. So you were the guy that ended up crashing the ship in the end, and you're a dickhead, and yeah. Curly has seen all the acts that you've done, but isn't able to speak because he's so badly wounded. You abuse him at multiple points when you're giving him his meds. Like, it's very audible that you're like punching him and he's in pain. It's crazy. And then you guys figure out that your entire cargo is just a bunch of mouthwash, and everyone starts to kind of give up that help is on the way, and people start just drinking mouthwash to get drunk off of it. People start going crazy. People start to figure out how bad of a person you are, and this is when things start like going wild and people start dying. Pretty much everybody dies but you and Curly, and at this point the game just turns into Jimmy's full psychotic episode. There's a part where you look into this like big alien sack thing and you use this like item to look into it, and it eventually becomes apparent that you're using an ultrasound, and you find the basically like the like skeletal fetus of a horse, which basically like represents this responsibility that you have as a new father of this baby that you didn't even want because you raped someone. The ending has you basically set up this weird birthday party with all of the corpses of the crew, and you cut off a piece of Curly and you eat it, and then you force feed Curly a piece of his leg, and then you put him in an escape pod, send him off, and then pretty much just kill yourself. This doesn't have a lot to do with Resident Evil's horror, but it kind of does, because it shows the type of weird, like, all in your head psychological stuff similar to Silent Hill that can be put into the game. Take Jill Valentine, for example, one of the first characters in Resident Evil in the first game. She went through that entire ordeal. She was part of STARS, and then in Resident Evil 3, she's an ex-member and everything, and there's literally a sequence where she has a PTSD episode, and like shoots herself in like in front of the mirror and turns into a zombie. And it's really cool because it represents her like actual trauma from that game. And then it just goes back to the regular Resident Evil like formula. But like horrific shit happens in Resident Evil games, and I would not wish like to put even my worst enemy into the universe that is Resident Evil. And I think it's a world that like I would love a game of like Leon or Jill or like some character like that, and have it just be their entire representations of the traumatic shit that happened in their minds, and have the game be set in their minds. Like Silent Hill. But anyway, Silent Hill 2 and Mouthwashing do the unreliable narrator trope really well, and I think it makes games and like those types of games have really cool visuals and a really cool story, because it's not really set in reality and it's psychological. I think that would be something really cool to see in a Resident Evil game. But you know, maybe one day we'll see it. And the final genre of horror that would be the cherry on top for Resident Evil games is this is one of the first rooms you encounter in the 2017 game Little Nightmares. In it, you play as a little girl in a raincoat that has to explore this submarine full of all types of monsters. But before you do, you come into this room, which fully sets the bleak tone that the game has. And I was 9 when I first played this game, and I mean, I was also just kind of stupid, but I did not really see what was really going on here. And it really surprises me looking back at it right now, because I just did not remember this at all. But as you can see, this dude used a really heavy chair as a counterweight to hang himself, and you can see the note he has on the ground, probably a suicide letter.
He would have suicided.
And his legs are just dangling in front of you. You're even forced to use the chair that he was standing on to boost yourself up into the next room. My point is that the game didn't need to use any scary monsters or conventional horror things like that. It just used its straight up environment, which I think is so cool. And there's some scary ass monsters in this game, but I think the fact that this is one of the first rooms you go into and how separate it is from the rest of the game is just really eerie and cool. Yeah, it's just awesome. It was the times when this game wasn't shoving the horror aspect in your face when it was actually scary the most. It was the environment and the mystery of this boat that you were just like exploring. It was the feeling of, quite literally speaking, being smaller than everything else. And this song gave me nightmares as a kid. But this is where I have to give credit where credit's due. Resident Evil has always been goated at this. The tiny creaks and cracks and the banging on doors and just, oh my god, it makes the game so much scarier. The grandma from Resident Evil 7 that just appears out of nowhere randomly and sings that like creepy ass song. Or in Resident Evil 8 where you hear a baby crying in the background and you're like, what's that? And then you see the alien baby. Those are all really good examples, so I'm kind of yapping just to yap. I think obviously there's things that Resident Evil could do better with their scary aspect, but when it comes to atmospheric, environmental horror, they really do have it down. But I think I should hammer down the point that you don't have to stick to generic horror to make your video game scary. And I think the best example of this is the king of horror games, Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's is literally a point-to-click horror game. Its core mechanics are really simple, and it's really just about surviving the night. And then you get hit with a corny jump scare, and it's not really that scary. But that's because Five Nights at Freddy's flips the scary video game game genre on its head. FNAF is like a blindfolded dude who knows black belt karate. If you put all the visual cues, the footsteps, the heavy breathing, the slamming of the doors, the phone calls, when you're frantically trying to do everything when you're about to get to 6 a.m. and you just know you're about to die, that's when the game becomes terrifying. I still haven't beat FNAF 4 to this day. Paired with some of the deepest, most complex lore in any fan base and video game that I have ever seen or played. It just shows you don't need to stick to the script. Resident Evil, you don't need to stick to the script. Thank you to everybody who watched this video. It might not be a bit until my next one. I'm probably gonna do it on One Piece, but I said that last time and then I got the idea for this one, so who knows? Also, me and my girlfriend broke up quite recently, so life's been a little rough, but you know, we ball, it's chill. I hope everybody who's watching this is living up life. Do what you want to do you know, no matter what anybody says, do you. We're literally living in a video game right now, like, you can literally do whatever you want. But seriously, I love all you guys, and I will see you in the next video. Deuces.